Today we're looking at a task 1 and we're going to take some level 5 to 5.5 writing and make it much better. So every task 1 begins with analyzing the task, and we can see here we have a table, and most importantly we have a time period from 1990 to 2000. So we're focusing everything we have on describing the changes over this time period. We're not only describing which is biggest and which is smallest, we must describe the changes. We can see here there are 5 different types of energy that are produced, and we have the totals at the bottom. So these are the amounts of energy produced in these 3 years, which represent a time period of a decade. So we can see here that someone has written a paragraph, and when I look at it, I can see that the first half is describing natural gas, and the second half seems to describe coal. So this writer has put these two categories together. I'm not entirely sure why. There's not a lot of logic here. One went up and one went down. So I'm not really sure why you would combine them in one paragraph, but we'll do the same thing here. Now, what makes this paragraph under a 6? Well, the first thing we notice, the very first thing we notice, is that when the writer describes coal, there are no numbers given. Now, if there are no numbers given for a category, it can't be described adequately because we just don't know how big these numbers are. So you have to give numbers for every category, or you have to give a way that we can work out the number. So in the first one, they give the number, and then they say that the end of the period is about double. So 51, 94, about double. So that's okay, but the description for coal is not adequate, so it's a 5 here. The other reason this is under a 6 is there are quite a lot of spelling errors. We've got rising, until, past should be past. We have words like approximately, we have compared, we have dramatically. So we have quite a lot of spelling errors. Also, the sentences are not grammatically correct, although they're actually not too bad. This could be level 6 for grammar. There is some complexity. There is a relative clause with which, although it is faulty, but task achievement and lexical resource are probably closer to the 5 level. So how can we take this and make it much better? And I want to stress here, it's really important that you're able to write some sentences that are error-free. So just learn a few sentence types and use them in your task 1. So here's a sentence we could write to describe natural gas. And I want you to notice some of the features here. We're going to start with the figure for natural gas. Now, the writer said natural gas started. And look, that's okay, but we really want to be saying it's the number that natural gas represents, which we say the figure for. And we say began at 51.2 units in 1990. So just learn this, memorize. Began at something in something. Just memorize it, and you can use it in any task where there's a time period. Comma. Now notice, by the way, there's a gap after the comma. The writer here put the gap before the comma, which is not correct. Rose by around 50% 6 years later. So notice that I'm giving the middle figure, right? The middle figure, but I'm not naming it. I'm using a different expression, by around 50%. And also notice that instead of saying 1996, I'm using a different expression to describe the year, and ended the period at approximately double its initial amount. The writer said compared to the start, but that's not really accurate. We can say here its initial amount, initial at the beginning. Also notice the relative clause at the end here, which was, we can omit that, the highest number at this time. So we can make a comment that this number here at this time was the highest figure. So even though I'm describing the changes, I'm also giving a comment comparing this number to the others because it is the highest, and we should point that out. So let's see how I've written the figure for coal. I've kept the linker here in contrast, which is really good. Okay, it introduces the idea to the reader that this is different. And I've said that of coal. Okay, that of refers back to the figure for. That of coal dropped dramatically. I've put a full stop here because I've chosen to put this idea in its own sentence to highlight it. I want to highlight that coal was dramatically different. It represented the second largest source at the beginning of the time frame at 66.9. So you can see here I've done a comparison. I've said the second largest source. I've compared this number to all the other numbers in the column. Is it incredibly important that this is the second largest? Maybe not, but I've highlighted it anyway here. with it subsequently almost halving to 38.1 a decade later. So what I've said here is that this number 66.9 has almost halved. Okay, and again I've said a decade later to give some variation in the time period. So you can see this is a much better sentence. It's accurate, the spelling is good, and I've included enough data, enough numbers, so that the reader can fully understand what's going on here.